This is episode 105 of the After Gambling Podcast. In this episode, I'm going to kick off a season 12. Yeah, a season that actually is going to have some episodes. So look forward to that. Just talking about a little bit of updates. It's been a while, so here we are, back again. Hey there, and welcome to the After Gambling Podcast. My name is still Jamie. I am a guy that used to gamble a lot back in my 20s, which now, in my early 40s, seems like a lifetime ago. And in so many ways it was. And so now sometimes do this little podcast. Going to get back to doing it regularly because, as I'll share in a little bit, just makes my life a little bit better. So in addition to helping make my life a little bit better, hopefully it makes your life or somebody that you know's life a little bit better as you learn a little bit about gambling behavior, a little bit about addiction in general, a little bit about human behavior, actually a lot of bit about human behavior, because I've discussed in other episodes, I'm a marketer, which makes me just naturally curious about how humans work. And as I am fond to say, humans, we are endlessly fascinating. And there is no shortage of endlessly fascinating things that we do that I take in, I probably overanalyze and try to connect them back. And that's ultimately use it to kind of better understand myself and then come on here and share the stuff that I've learned about myself, the things that work, the things that don't work, with the application through gambling, but really like the stuff. And as I'm fond to tell people, the last 20, 30 episodes, it's basically just become an episode or a podcast about life. So that's what this is. And back here, once again, it's been over a year, I think, since the last episode, because I think that was in Problem Gambling Awareness Month. And we are here again in Problem Gambling Awareness Month. And this episode is not going to have anything to do with Problem Gambling Awareness Month, but it is when it is. So anyways, I wanted to get back, was chatting with a friend today. And this has just been something that's been on my mind. And yes, that friend, you can thank Mark Checkwitz, who was on a previous episode, and you're going to hear more of in some special episodes coming up. But Mark's an active gambler, but he just kept saying, you know what? And he kind of has been nudging me over the years to say, you need to do more episodes. You need to do more episodes. And he finds that it helps him in his active gambling. But also he knows how many people that he's referred to that it's helped them as well. And I think he probably, being one of my best friends, knows that it makes me a better person. And ultimately, that's why I'm back here again. So shout out to Mark for kind of pushing me to get back into this. But also, it's something I've been leaning towards. And as I've gone through different things the last 4 or 5 years, ups, downs, all that we have. And they're just human. I haven't overanalyzed them. In a lot of ways, having gone through things and knowing so much about myself, I've been able to kind of weather those ups and downs in a much better way than I would have in my 20s or even my 30s. And so I probably didn't come back to do the podcast and I didn't really connect the dots. But as he said, he's like, the things that you share, this is after gambling, like these are things that people probably might be interested in. So that's one of the first things I said was, I don't think I have anything to say. And this was I listened to Brian Hatch's All In podcast earlier this morning as I was working out and trying to get back in shape. That's one thing that I've let go of and I need to get back to. And one of those pillars of things that when I do the podcast, all of a sudden I start working out more. I start just kind of being in a better state overall. But was listening to Brian's podcast and he had a great guest on that was talking about kind of things that you should do to surf urges or with gambling. And as he was talking about just all the things he suggested, I'm like, yeah, we've talked about that. We've talked about that. We've talked about that. And they're all mixed into different episodes, but it's all out there. People can listen to it. I don't need to do any more damn episodes. People don't need to hear from me anymore. They don't need to hear my latest take or the 10th time saying a certain thing. But like Mark said, this is after gambling. And also some of those things people might not go back and listen to. So we'll definitely be going over some of what I consider the best practices. That'll actually be in the next episode. I'm going to do what are my best practices, suggestions that I would give to my former self or friend or neighbor or whoever it is about how to stop gambling in 2025 when things have changed a little bit. So I'll cover that. But again, go back, listen to those old episodes because they are still relevant, but I will kind of get on here. And again, I'm going to do it for me. And I think that's something that when I first started doing this, I definitely did it for me. And all throughout, it's been there've been times where I did it for other people, just kind of the listeners. You get on and all of a sudden you have a bunch of people sending you messages saying how much it helps. And that's a blessing and a curse, a pro and a con, which foreshadowing is going to be another episode coming up here in the future, just because that's one of my favorite frameworks. But there are these pros and cons. And there's times where, okay, it feels really good. You get this feedback, but then it also can be overbearing. It can be too much. And I can look at it and be like, all right, I have my kids are growing up. I'm busy. I'm coach. I'm husband. I'm father. I'm all these things at home, cleaning dishes, putting stuff away, trying to just kind of keep everybody's schedule going. And at the same time, I'm a business owner. I'm trying to get stuff out the door. I'm trying to process orders. I'm trying to get some new clients and keep the old ones happy and all those types of things. And that's weighing on me. And then I brought in the podcast, which then brought me into this whole field of responsible gambling and problem gambling, where I do some consulting. Not as much as I would like to do in that space. And that's part of my frustrations. But open up a whole nother thing. And all this time, I just keep adding other things and keep getting wider. And the podcast was one of the things I just dropped. And good, bad, indifferent, I don't know. Like I say, I know there are pros and cons to it. It definitely was one of those things that kind of got me away from some things that just the stressors or thoughts that I had to do it for other people, which then I think that's where I guess my mind's going with this is I got away from doing it for myself and started doing it for other people, which is a good benefit. But I think ultimately it works best when it's me doing it for me. And that's kind of what I'm coming back here to restart it again with is going to do it for me. And a lot of the same things are going to be the same. Maybe some things will be a little bit different as I go through it. I don't know. We'll find out. But like I said, I can't get by the fact that I'm in just a much better space throughout when I'm sharing my thoughts in general. And recently, I haven't been doing the podcast, and I found myself sharing my thoughts in other spaces and other things, especially in the responsible and problem gambling space, which I don't know that those have always been good, healthy outlets for my frustrations or observations. And so go back to what works, right? And that's ultimately, I'm sure probably had an episode about that. If not, we'll do one in the future about just kind of when you have these times where all of a sudden you start to realize, okay, things aren't quite as smooth as they were a few years ago. And really just kind of going back to being that person that's both the analyst and also kind of the subject, and just what were you doing different back then? And for me, for many years, I was doing the podcast on a weekly basis, or at least a lot more regularly than I have the last 4 or 5 years. And so that was working. That was kind of an anchor point. So going back to it. And I think that is, when I look back at it, you had a pandemic that we've all gone through. We have all these different changes. My work mix has changed. I have a lot of the same clients, but have some new ones or different responsibilities. And so you have all these things that are constantly changing. And that's something I've always known, that anytime you have a lot of changes, you're going to have kind of pulls to escape. And in the past, that was my pull to gambling and not going back to poker. So I don't have any like news like, okay, hey, I went and played in poker tournaments. That's none of it. But probably some of it was like eating too much or kind of like lashing out on Twitter at people or stating views on Twitter. And some people are probably nodding along right now and smiling or not smiling, depending on who they are. But you just kind of get back to figure out what was working. And so, like I said, doing the podcast, coming on here and talking and just sharing these things. That's something Brian always says, hey, talking helps. Can't figure out why. But I've always had my group. And that's been one of the things that's been steady throughout this, is having my group on Mondays and then Wednesdays. I think we're going to have to go back to Mondays in the near future because of baseball, but having an outlet. And so I have that one, but this is another one that is a valuable one for me. And this one does have, I'm not gonna lie, there's like dopamine rushes. There's excitement that happens. Not really I think the whole dopamine story is a little bit of a marketing ploy, but anyways, that's another podcast. We'll share that one another time, but it's just basic human behavior, right? Like we get excited when people like things, when people are sharing things, when you go on and look and, oh, hey, you get a message that somebody listened to it in Nevada or in the UK or around the world. Like that has these like benefits that it was hard for me to quantify. And also at times hard for me to justify, like, okay, like how do you value that versus, hey, I got to get ready. We have a baseball game in a couple hours, or I have a project that's due in a little bit. And this isn't something that, because I just did it for myself, and I've actually actively kind of turned down sponsorships. Sponsorship was never something I really wanted to do with this. If anything, I might do some different programs here in the near future. I'll share more on those. Where we have some like membership stuff, or maybe we have some hangouts, maybe we have some other thing. I've done some coaching along the way, which is nice. Just a nice way to get to chat with people, but got to figure out the way to frame that and set that up. It really works for everybody involved. But yeah, I don't know. So I'm going to look at this. I am going to come back to this more selfishly, doing it for myself, both mentally, but then also figure out, okay, are there some ways that I can create some revenue streams from this to where I don't get to the point again where it's like, okay, you're pouring hours and hours and hours into this, and likes and downloads are great, but ultimately, like, you also have a work project that's due next week. And so spending 3 or 4 hours on developing the podcast episodes when you have work that actually pays the bills, it's hard to make that in my head, that trade-off. So got to figure out some ways that we can do on that. And I will. I have ideas. It's something I've always been hesitant. And that's, as you may notice, this episode is very much a Jamie free-flowing. I have nothing written down. I think I wrote down a few thoughts. I have a bunch of thoughts and things outlined. I'll be a little bit more specific in future episodes on what the topics are, but this is kind of after a long way away. I don't know if this is going to be 15 minutes or 60 minutes of Jamie venting or sharing or whatever you want to call it. But yeah, it's something, I got to figure that out. And like I said, it's just, I'm real particular about certain things. And I've had some people come, and some of them are good products, good services that wanted to partner up, but it just wasn't the right time, or I'm just really hesitant to do anything that's in the gambling space, because I just don't know. And it's something that if I haven't used it, or if I don't really get in and see it and think, okay, yeah, I would use this, then I struggle to have it as a sponsor, even though that's not a recommendation. I think it is an implicit recommendation. So if I do any sponsorship, it'll probably be for things like Audible. I've done Audible in the past, or other opportunities where you might be able to support the podcast through that. But really, it's probably going to come down to some kind of membership levels. I may have that figured out by the time I release this. I may not, but I'll kind of share those as we go, where maybe kind of some support, you get some special features, some special downloads, or some special access. And we do that, which is a way to, again, make this to where it's something that I do to help people, but also have some justification when I look at how I spend my time and say, okay, yeah, that's valuable in both mental health, and I'm a better Jamie, but also it adds a couple dollars. At the end of the day, I'm being honest, like, it's hard to put hours and hours and hours of time into things. And unfortunately with a podcast, the number of listeners that I actually talk to is probably like 1%, probably less than way less. Actually, it's probably way less than 1%. So you have a lot of people that find it useful, helpful, and it's just hard to, you don't see it. They're not in front of you. It's not like clients. When I do a design work project or I build a website for somebody, I see them, I see their reaction. I can understand and follow, okay, how is this helping their business? We add aspects to it, and it helps bring in more revenue and all that type of thing. And so this has been one of those things where, because of the nature of it, it's a unique setup where I don't always see those. And so I think that's one of the things that I got to figure out how to build some of that into whatever kind of structure I have, so that I'm getting some of that feedback along the way. Because it's kind of that mix of emotional stuff is just as much important as the financial stuff. But again, I don't know. We'll figure that out as we go. But again, back to the bigger theme of just being a better Jamie. And yeah, and the other thing I'll share, I do have some life changes coming up, and that's probably another reason. I mentioned sports and coaching. I've been doing that, as you know, or I think I've been sharing, like, I've coached my kids sports pretty much all the time. They're getting to the age where I'm pushing them out of the nest, which is the perfect timing to do it. And really, I mean, I've gotten to the end where I'm not going to be coaching their teams as much. So that's going to be a big change. I'm going to volunteer to help with with my daughter's team, and that'll be great. But give us the flexibility so that we can kind of trade off schedules and go to the person split, divide and conquer when we need to, without the attachment that I had with coaching both teams, which I did last year. Last year was awesome. So much fun, but also stressful, and put a lot of stress on family and friends and all that type of stuff, as it's like, okay. And work was really rough because I'm trying to balance all these things. So I don't know, you probably know me better than I know myself at times, and I probably try and do too many things, try and get spread too wide. I always go back to one of the first episodes. At the time, I was reading a couple of different really good books. I think The One Thing was one of them. And there was another book, I'm trying to think of it right now. They have the quote about willpower, which is really good. but they're both about like removing things from your life and simplifying your life and streamlining. Like, don't try and do 10 things at once. Do one thing really well. And I don't know, for whatever reason, that has never really resonated with me. It does resonate with me. I know it would be better, but it's difficult. So I find myself in these situations. I get myself probably spread too thin, and then I lose track of doing the podcast, or I'm doing the podcast and I lose track of doing something else. And so it's constantly battling and balancing these things out without going overboard. And that's ultimately, I think that's why I look at the big picture of this is like life after gambling. You're going to have all these things, whether it's gambling or drinking or whatever you're doing too much, which we all do too much. And I don't want to spoil that one, but I think that's another episode coming up. I haven't talked about that one already, but we all have these tendencies. I think it's basic human tendency. I see it in marketing, and it's just something that we all do the same things. They're often illogical, irrational, all of the above, and very predictable also as a marketer. But I'm not exempt from that. I'm aware of it, and that's at best. I'm aware of it and start to see it. And so this is one of those times where you see it and it's like, okay, what do we need to do? How do we need to reorganize Jamie's thoughts, time, attention? And in the moment right now, it feels like doing the podcast is probably going to be one of those things. So I'm going to commit to doing it. I'm just going to come out right now. I'm going to commit to doing a weekly episode here for the next year. See where we look, see where that lands us, see what it looks like. Change up, like I said, structure. They're going to be the episodes, what to expect. I definitely have some coming up that have, it's funny. All right. So again, I'm just talking. I can literally convince myself that I have nothing to say. And then I'll sit down and be like, oh, that's a good topic, and write out like notes on that. Oh, that's a good topic, and write on notes on that. And all of a sudden, like 10 minutes later, I have like 15 episodes laid out. So I obviously have things to say. The question is whether people are interested in them. And apparently you guys are. You listen. I just looked today. It's like there have been 6,000 downloads this year. I haven't even released an episode in over a year, and yet people are still listening to it. So there must be something there. So I'm just going to trust myself that I'm going to come on to things that are interesting to you. So there'll be some that are gambling related. But again, I'm really coming at this as just the after gambling, which is just humans. This is going to be a podcast about human behavior with a understanding and reference consistently to gambling addiction, but you could replace that with anything. And you could replace that with coaching your kids stuff too much, working too much, whatever it is, eating too much, you name it too much, that we all have these times and these things that we lean towards. So hopefully this will just be a podcast about human behavior through the lens of gambling addiction. So that sounds interesting to me. You stuck around for this long, so maybe you'll be interested in sticking around for that. But there's going to be those. Also, coming up, these are actually already out. You can go check these out, but I'll be posting them here probably, let's see, it's the end of March right now. These are going to come out sometime in April in the After Gambling podcast feed. Partnered up. Really excited about those. I mentioned my friend Mark earlier. Mark and I gathered together and joined up with the Cambridge Health Alliance Division of Addiction at Harvard to do some podcasts. And so we did a 3-part series last year. We're going to do another 3-part series. I'm allowed to say that. We're doing another 3-part series this year. And those were really good. And it really was just, and the framework was me as a former gambler, Mark as an active gambler, coming together and just talking about gambling and like how gamblers think, how we act, all those types of things. So it gets into the nitty gritty about like all the things, the weird things that go on in our heads, how we react to things, when we're sensitive to things, when we're not, our views on a range of topics. And then the cool thing about this was that then the Division of Addiction went through and they found research and matched it up and said, okay, yeah, hey, Mark and Jamie, they're onto something here because there's research that shows this is true. If there were places where things didn't line up, obviously, I think they'd point it out. But the episodes turn out great. So you get to hear from Mark and I for about 30 minutes. And then the second half of that is the Division of Addiction sharing their thoughts. So I will post Mark and I's conversation here in a few episodes. Like I say, I'm going to record and probably do 6 or 7 episodes. I don't know. Sometime late April, you will see those come out. But if you want to research, or you want to listen to those now, you can go find them. If you Google search Cambridge Health Alliance and then After Gambling Podcast or Podcast Accelerator Series is, I think, what it's called. You can check those out. And again, in the framework of those, it was designed to educate specialists so people could kind of better understand gamblers. So treatment professionals could listen to those and kind of match up how gamblers talk in the real world or in their minds or with friends, and then match it up with research. So that was a really cool project. Again, I'll be posting those and then links to all those, but you can go out and search those and find those today if you want. If you're itching for a few episodes early, or you want to get out ahead of that. But that's an exciting one. So really thankful for the Division of Addiction. There's a wonderful person there that headed that up, Dr. Debbie LaPlante. So shout out to Debbie for reaching out. She actually listened to the episode with Mark and I. I was like, you know what, those two, what if we got them together and just had them talk about gambling? And that's, at first we're like, what is this all about? And like, how is this going to work? But no, she's been awesome to work with, working with her on another series this year and some other stuff. So excited for that and very thankful for that opportunity. You never know. And that kind of is one of those things that in doing this, like I said, it's easy for me. And I think as humans, human behavior, we always look for the things that are going wrong. And it's easy to find those. It's easy to find the people that didn't reach out and kind of get hung up on, what was it? What did I say? What is it that I don't have to offer, that they don't reach out, and overlook the people that did. So I know that's definitely true in my case. And in some ways, I think if I had to answer, like if you said, Jamie, why haven't you done a podcast? It's because I know these contradictions are going on, because I recognize them. I see them in my head. It's like you're frustrated because you don't think there's like support for the podcast. You don't think there's people sharing it. You don't think that like people value your opinion because you don't have whatever letters before or after your name. You don't. I mean, there's been some. How do I say this? I've been in this space now for 7 years. I've talked to a lot of people. It's fascinating the people I haven't talked to, and frustrating. But whatever. It's their choice. I don't know, whatever. I do what I can. But there have been a lot of people that I've talked to, and we talk about, oh yeah, and it's like, oh yeah, we should do something. We should do something together. We should do something. And most of them don't go anywhere. And that's frustrating. And so it's like, I can get hung up and focus on all those situations where things didn't go right. But I also know there are plenty of situations where things have gone. There are a couple of situations, maybe not plenty, but a few. And so I don't know, again, human behavior, we focus on those things. And so I think the problem I've had, or the reason I've resisted doing a podcast, especially a rambly one like this, where I try and explain what I know in my head is irrational, is that I've got these thoughts that I know are contradictory. And once you bring them out of your head into the real world, you're going to have to face, in some ways, that contradiction. No, I'm pretty tough on myself, or pretty self-aware most of the time. And that's where I'll have these things. I'm like, I can't say that because it's sort of, there's some elements that aren't true to that. Or I can't say that because, well, what about this? And I think I've got myself, and it's similar to the gambling stuff, where you get yourself in this situation where you don't feel like you can make a decision that is proper. So you just stay doing the same thing, which for me has been not doing podcasts. For me back in the day, it was just going to the poker table. For me, it's a range of things over the years that I find myself, when I get stuck in these things, is I just stay stuck and often don't go back to those things that I know work. And I think that's a human behavior. It's ego, it's pride, it's all sorts of things. Like, shouldn't we already know these things? And of course, yes, you should already know. You did learn those things, but still that application can be difficult. And so it can be hard to be like, all right, like apply this back. So I'm sure there's been a bunch of that. There's probably been a bunch of, I don't really want to shine a light back on myself. I did that for many years on the podcast, and it's been really positive. But at times it's like pretty revealing, right? People all over the world listening to you share like the things you suck at. That can be a little rough at times when you really think about it. In fact, I probably just didn't think about it. And then I got to the point where I had people reach out, and when I wasn't doing episodes, saying, hey, really bummed out, like, I miss it, like I need it. And I think those need ones were the ones that were really the toughest ones. Because I was like, I don't know that I can be that for you. And so instead of saying that and creating those boundaries, which is a good thing with gamblers are like the nicest people, right? Like that's one of the weirdest things that I see is like when we talk about GA and like selfishness, and people say, oh yeah, I was just a selfish ego maniac. I'm like, yeah, were you really though? And it's usually not. It's usually a lack of boundaries actually is the bigger problem, or some grand beliefs, not so much the other. But again, getting back to that, it's just like, I don't know. It was an internal struggle. And so it was easier to just opt out of something that nobody was expecting, or people were expecting, but because they weren't, and going back to what I said earlier, a lot of people, I didn't see the faces. I saw some on my like Wednesday group, Monday group, or I knew a few of the people, but most of the people just don't ever reach out. So it's kind of like out of sight, out of mind. And I probably didn't want to think about it. Probably didn't. Like, I haven't really thought about this. And as you can probably tell, I'm just kind of spitfiring this, but I don't know. That's where it's been the last little bit. And yeah, the part with, I was really kind of getting involved with some of the problem gambling stuff at a state and national level. And I stepped away from that. That was my choice in a lot of ways. There's stuff I would love to do in those spaces, but those things just didn't seem to be coming up. The stuff I was being approached with was not really stuff I'm interested in. And that was frustrating. And there's other things there that I'm not going to get into now, but it just has been interesting and interesting to observe as sports betting gets rolled out across the U.S. And I think that's probably another one I struggle with is I know all the problems that are going to come from it, but I think that it should get expanded. I think it should get legalized. How is completely different. And the why is different, and a lot of those things. So it's hard to square all these thoughts that I have where it's like, okay, you're doing a podcast to help people to stop gambling, but like you're actively pro expansion of gambling. Do you say that? Are listeners going to get mad at that? Are they going to get whatever? And so it's one of many probably things that have pushed me kind of back away from doing this podcast. So I'll try and stay away from most of those topics in this. I'll try and just focus on the human behavior, addiction, what I think about it. Because it's something that just know the number of hours that I spend thinking about these things. Well, I haven't done podcasts in the last little bit. Some of my thoughts have probably changed a little bit. But man, I spent a lot of time thinking about these things. So it may feel like I'm just spitfiring them at times, but there's literally hours and hours and hours of like, why do humans do this? Why do I do this? Why does so-and-so do this? And often I know the answers, but it's still complicated. But humans, endlessly fascinating people. So what else is happening? Overall in life, just at a point where work is really busy. It's good. Family is very good. Everybody's been healthy. Kind of through COVID, that whole time was that was a mess. There's plenty of things that I probably haven't. You're sure probably the same way. And none of us have probably really unpacked that whole situation, but you really look at it. Sometimes it feels like it was not that long ago. Other times it feels like a lifetime ago. But that was something that was quite disruptive. And I'm not going to say that was one of the things that I stopped doing the podcast, but it was definitely one of the things I stopped doing the podcast because it was strange. And there's some weird stuff in that whole situation. But no, things are ultimately better. And every day gets a little bit better. It's hard to see it in the moment. Some of the days feel not great. Some of them feel stressed out or have a work project. I'm like, I don't really want to do this. This is work I'm not really that interested in. It's like, okay, you're getting paid to do something that you mostly enjoy. And there's other days where it's just a lot of projects I really do enjoy. And ultimately, I know this is going to be one of the episodes later, I get to choose. And that's one of the most frustrating but exciting things about humans is that ultimately we get to write our story. We get whatever we choose to believe about something really does become a reality in so many cases. That doesn't mean we always get the roses. We don't always get the championships. We don't always get the whatever, insert here, money, fame, relationship, etc. But we do get to choose how we view everything. And that's really my goal as I go to this season 12, is to share a lot of those thoughts that I have on what I've learned about myself and human behavior in general. But then also just really try and apply them in a way that is beneficial. That's like, okay, I can tell myself any story I want. I can believe any story I want. So let's not spend too much time on the ones that don't have the outcome that we want. And I think that's where I've been the last few years, is getting caught up and frustrated by all sorts of things that I have plenty of reasons and proof and whatever that, okay, these things are messed up, they're wrong or whatever. But I can look at them a different way. I can see them as an opportunity to go explore work elsewhere, or to work with different people, or to do other things. So it all comes down to that framing. And that is the most kind of liberating thing there is. That's the one thing, the gambling stuff, when you're caught in the grips of addiction, when you're caught in that feeling of, I have to go to the casino, I have to do this, that there's only one way of anything. The reality is there isn't. There's multiple different ways. And so for me, I don't know how this is going to work. Kind of doing a leap of faith. Well, not really a leap. I've thought this stuff through. Well, who am I trying to fool? Like, I literally overthink everything and overplan everything. And it's just kind of the execution where I get hung up on. And so I'm going to focus on executing the plan that I have in my head, for all of you, for myself, most importantly, and see where it goes. Because I'm confident in my abilities. I'm confident in my ability to deliver stuff of value to you. And I'm confident in that this will make me a better person. And also, I think it'll probably help a lot of people as well along the way. So where are we at? 30 minutes? Yeah, I'm not going to do too much editing to this one, so I apologize. It is what it is. But I think you'll appreciate it. I hope. If you don't, hey, no problem. Stop back and see the next couple if it doesn't work out for you. No problem. I want to wrap up with some other things. I'm going to talk about this in the next one, but there are so many good resources out there. And this is, I'll start with one, which is gamblersinrecovery.com. Gamblersinrecovery.com. And this is a great example of something that I've gotten really frustrated with recently. I saw they were doing a GoFundMe to raise some money. They want to update the website, which I always told people, I'm like, the website's terrible. It's ugly. It's whatever, but it works. It has all the information you need. And so Gamblers in Recovery has both Gamblers of Anonymous meetings and Gam-Anon meetings. I think they also have maybe Smart Recovery. I don't know, but I know it has a bunch of meetings. So one of the best things you can do is go listen to other people talk, and it works. It's just like, it works. So go check out that website. But they were doing a GoFundMe to try and raise some money to update the website, so I don't have to say like, oh, it's kind of ugly, and to do hosting. And the cost on it was like nothing compared to what gets spent in the space, like 10 grand, literally like $10,000, which I just saw that and it sent me off as one of those ones and definitely hit some of my pain points. It's like, all right, here is one of the top resources that I recommend. Actually, I was listening to the podcast earlier and the guy that was on Brian's podcast recommended this as well. So you got people in the space that are recommending this as one of the top resources. And here they are begging for $10,000. Begging for $10,000. Meanwhile, I see states, not to be named, spending millions of dollars on things that shouldn't even make it out the door. But I said I wouldn't say too much on that front, so I'll try not to go down that road. But gamblersinrecovery.com is a great resource. I hope everybody, if it's valuable to you, to go check it out and support it. And yeah, it's a great resource. So that's a good one. I haven't been on Reddit much, but I'm sure it's great. It's just raw human people. Other podcasts, there's a bunch of other ones popping up. I think Rob is one. It's like one day at a time. I'm sure there's others. I need to get back into the mix of figuring out like who's around, what they're doing, and support those because I haven't been doing that as much. So that's on me, but I'll try. It's just, I don't know. A lot of people reach out and filtering out. Like I say, it's been a few years of filtering and being like, what do I really want to do in this space? What do I really want to do in this space? And ultimately, I think if I go with what is best for me, and then it's going to be the best thing that I can put out into the space. So here I am. I'm back. Surprise. whatever you want to think about this. But, and on that topic, if you want to go leave some reviews, leave reviews. I'll figure out some ways. I do want to get some. I know Spotify, I think, has a way that you can leave messages now for podcasts to listen to. I do want to try and connect more. That's really my thought on doing some kind of membership to where I have some thing where people either can drop in for an hour or whatever, or 30 minutes, or I just kind of have office hours where people can drop in, chat, and say hi. That is the one thing, like I said, it's just, you don't know. You don't know if is anybody, like, want to tap the mic, like, is this thing on? Like, I know people are listening. Who is it? So I think that will help make it something where there's this kind of mutually beneficial thing going on where I don't feel like it's something that I have to do because other people are counting on it, but it's something that I also get a lot out of it. So looking into that. What else? I don't know. I hope things are good in your life, ultimately. And that's, I guess, I hope that you're on a similar journey of trying to be the best version of you. This is me trying to be the best version of myself, which, again, I'll be the first to say I haven't always been that the last few years, and that's been kind of the struggle. I look at myself and say, well, you're not wrong about things, but you're not being the best version of yourself. So that's been a constant struggle I've been trying to figure out. If anybody has advice on that, I'm all ears. One other thing I know I want to talk about here is friends and family. Got to do some stuff for you guys. So whether I'm going to start, it might be a standalone, but going to do some episodes on how to help somebody, but mainly how to help yourself also. And so friends and family are usually the ones that are most interested outside of the gamblers that reach out to me. Most of my messages for coaching or help come from mothers specifically, which I have some thoughts on that, but we'll get into those. But I'll be hopefully doing some stuff for friends and family. So friends and family, if you want to reach out, jamie@aftergambling.com, and you want to shoot me a message with like what your big questions are, what your big struggle points are. I know a lot of them, but I'd like to hear them from you just to confirm them, or to give me some ideas on how I can build like a similar style coaching, but it's more of like a group thing or drop-in type. I don't know. I think you know what I'm talking about. What that looks like for you, because I think that's the biggest area that we can kind of improve on that front. So yeah, anybody wants to reach out, jamie@aftergambling.com. I'm always open, always all ears to hear what you're working on. And then finally, I will say this selfishly. I said I'm doing this selfishly, right? If you work in the responsible or problem gambling space and you're trying to reach gamblers, I'm really good at it. I actually have a marketing degree. I've been doing marketing for 20 some years. I've done this podcast, and that, like I said, has lots and lots of downloads. I'm pretty good at understanding target audience. I'm pretty good at developing campaigns. So reach out to me. I do that stuff. I would love to do that stuff more as a full-time gig rather than some of the work that I do, which is really good marketing, but not for this industry. So if you want to reach out, you can use the same email address, and we can always shift over to my other business accounts. But yeah, I said I'm going to be selfish. So there you go. Asking for what you want is part of the thing that, as gamblers, I think there's a big reason why we gamble. It's like escape because we're afraid or uncomfortable of asking for what we want. So in this, I want you to keep coming back. I want you to let me know what's going on in your life and that this is helping you. I want you to let me know what I can do better as far as episodes. I want you to reach out if you need help with marketing. And it's going to be something that I need to be better at, being selfish and saying, oh yeah, and you actually have to pay me, because a lot of people do stuff and they're like, oh, you don't have to pay me. Don't pay me. Well, I need to. That's ultimately where I've gotten is I have a lot of different kind of irons in the fire. And unfortunately, I'm often kind of making myself last in those. So it comes down to not billing people. It comes down to giving too much. And I've always been one that I wanted to give more than I receive, but I think I've gotten that way out of balance at times, both financially, emotionally, podcastly, businessly. I'm going to use all these fancy terms. So yeah, reach out. If you want to sponsor the show, it's probably not going to happen, but if you want to support the show, you can definitely support the show. Reach out to me. We can come up with some ways Like I said, I'm just real protective. I'm real protective of my brand and connecting myself with things because in the moment, you don't know. You don't know. So that's all I got to say. Well, other than that, I am not a doctor. I'm not a lawyer. I'm none of those things. I haven't man, what a failure I am. I have not added any letters between or behind or before my name in the last few years. And I'm losing some. I'm losing coach. So that's going to be a bummer. But no, I'm none of those things. So reach out for professional help. There's a lot of it out there. There's more and more coming up. And trust your instinct. Some people don't know what they're talking about. Some people do. You will know. Trust your instinct. Be honest with yourself. But if you're working with a therapist and they don't seem to get it, I've done the same. Go to a different one. Try a different one. Try 2, try 3. Same for all the stuff, financial stuff. Like you got to get somebody that like you believe in, you trust, right? And now you want to be careful, but like, yeah, trust your instinct. So that's my 2 cents on that. Find people that have letters before and after the name that makes sense to you, because. Other than that, music for the show is Something Elated by Broke for Free and is licensed under the Creative Commons license. My name is Jamie, and I guess I will see you in episode 106. We're back doing this thing again. So, look forward to seeing you then. Bye.